The next chart we look at is something known as a column chart, and then there are a variety of column charts which are also available as the functionality of Excel suggests and gives us. So we'll take a look at how does this become useful. Suppose we are given data which is kind of two-dimensional in nature. Remember, we had earlier seen data which was dates and sales numbers. Now let's say we are given dates, we are given sales numbers, and we are given sales numbers for regions as well. So essentially, not only do we have the month in which the sales are given, if it was only Asia, then you could have drawn a line chart here. But now the challenge is that we have what is called as the regions as well. So for each of the regions in January, a set of sales is given. In February, a set of sales is given in million for this particular company. The subtotals are given for each of the regions. The subtotals are given for the entire, for the entire set of 6 months in each of the regions, and for each month for all the four regions as well, right? So that adds up and that gives us the data. Now, how do we do this? Just again select the set of data you want to represent, which is Jan to June, and Asia, Europe, Asia, and Asia and Latin America. Let's change this one to Africa and Latin America. Select this data and click on insert. And now we insert this tab here. So look at this tab here. That's where the column charts are. So we insert a two-dimensional column chart, right? Now, once again, we will go through a similar set of exercises. We essentially see the column chart here, and we can first click on the chart title, double click this, and change this to worldwide sales, right? I can press Control B, which emboldens it. Now, once again, as usual, you could set all these designs which are already available for you, and you could see that there are a variety of predefined data sets which are available. But in this particular case, because there is multiple sets of data which is available, you do need what is called as a legend as well. That legend talks about the four regions in which you're looking at, and when you right click, you can format the legend. You can format the legend once again in terms of multiple things. First being legend options. Where do you put it? At this point of time, it's at the bottom. You could put it at the top where it goes up. You could put it on the left where it comes here. You could put it on the right or top right, right? I'll keep it at the bottom to begin with. We could select this, and the same way you changed your text for the other ones, you could just go and increase the text size. You could underline it or embolden it and change the font as well if you want, right? So that's this as available. Grid lines, similar exercise as we saw in the line charts case. You could select the grid lines and just delete them, not really required. Sales are given in terms of millions, so we select the sales axis, which is the left hand axis. Now I will increase the font size, I will embolden it, and I will right click and click format axis. Now the look at the bounds. We have 0, we have 200 as the upper bound. Major axis is 20, right? So instead of 20, we can probably put in 25, right? And we see the differentiation coming in the form of that. We see 25 coming there. The second thing is we could kind of try and even change the minimum number that we see. So the minimum number we see is kind of 40 here. So we could also start at, let's say, something like 40 and go on above that, right? So essentially the only challenge with seeing something like 40 is that some of the data points may not come clearly. So that's something that you have to define. In terms of 0 to 200, I think it looks fine. We've changed that to 20. Then we click on the month axis and we right click and format axis. And once again, you could embolden it, you could increase the font size, and kind of look at that in more detail. Now comes the more important part, which is in the context of a couple of interesting functionalities that this entire set would allow us. What we see right now is for every month, the data for all the regions clubbed together, right? You could change this to look at data for every region for all the months clubbed together, right? How do we do that? You click on the chart, click on right click this, click on select data. Now the way we have selected data, the legend entries are Asia, Europe, Africa, and Latin America, whereas the horizontal category axis labels are Jan, Feb, March. I can switch the row and column. If I switch the row and column and click on OK, you find that your legend now changes to Jan, Feb, March, April, May, June, and you see Asia's data in one shot, Europe's in another shot, Africa in another shot, and Latin America in another shot. Right? That may not be relevant to our purpose of representation, but Excel allows us this representation, and that's the important part to try and understand that by a simple flip of the data, you could arrive at this number. So we go to select data and we switch it back to its original format, right? Now, within the set of data that you have, you could select on each of these data panels and try and change what is going to be the color for these. So you could format the data series. You could select the fill for each of these data series, and you could change that fill if you like, right? So you could change that fill if you like. You could also select all of these kind of and try and put in the data labels as well, right? So you could do a right click on this and put in data labels, add data labels, right? So you could add data labels to this and this, and finally to the purple one as well. So you add data labels to all of them. You could select all the data labels and do formatting on these as well, just like we were doing all this while on the other areas. Just select and embolden, select and embolden. That could be done. And now within the data labels, you could try and play around with a little bit of designing on the data labels as well, as to where do you really show them, or you could for example drag it up or drag it down a little bit to kind of represent your own data on the chart that you look at, right? So we have data available, we have data month-wise available for each of these regions. Now, the next thing we could do is we could click the chart, and you see this plus on the on the right hand side. You can click on this and you can just remove all the data labels in one shot. You can click it again, brings the data labels. You can bring in the axis titles. You could remove that as well. You could bring in grid lines, remove them. You could put in the data table as well within the chart. If you click on data table, it will show you the data table right below the chart, and you can select it and then do the same calculations here as well, embolden it so that it becomes bold, and you could remove the data table once again, such that we have the same chart that is available with us once again. Right now, let's look at these series bars that we see. You see, when you look at these series bars, the columns that you see something called as series overlap. If you keep reducing this, the bars become smaller and they move further away from each other. I'll bring it back to the initial phase where it actually kind of can be made to overlap. You could also create gap width, which is the width between months, essentially, thereby making the bars more constricted and narrower, then wider. You could reduce the gap width and thereby making the bars, the columns, a little bit more broader, essentially. Right. So those are the functionalities that are available with a column chart that we have. Now, a column chart could have a wide variety of different forms that you could use. Right now, what we are looking at is a column chart that has essentially data being represented in the form of each month 4 bars for each of the 4 regions, right? We might want to represent percentage wise where does the data come from every month, right? So you select it, format, click on, essentially, you need to change the chart type. Now in this, the top one is what we have already selected. we go to the next one, that kind of gives you a stacked column chart, what is called as a stacked column chart. The moment you click a stacked column chart and click on OK, for every month, it starts putting the data in the form of essentially one single column. And then, within the column, what are the kind of different ranges which are available. And now you can correspondingly go ahead and add the data labels to this. And the data labels added to this will basically give you the sense of where the data set is, right? So essentially this could be one of the options that you could use. The other one that you could do is within this you could go change the chart type, and let's say you want to represent it in form of percentages, right? So every month, what percentage of sales comes from what region? This is the third option within the column charts, which is called a 100% stacked column chart. Click on that, click on OK, and you get the data set based on this. Now, obviously, it does not represent things correctly at this point of time because the top end shows 2500%. We need to format the axis once. Once we format the axis for the top end to show, let's say, 1, and the bottom end to show 0, is when you will see the stacked column chart show exactly the correct percentages that come in the form of, how much percentage is coming from what. Now, it doesn't represent the percent at this point of time. What it shows is the data label, but it doesn't show the percentage at this point of time. You need to change the, format the data labels to essentially show the percentages, right? So we can select this. The drawback of the data that you see here is that because it kind of puts everything in 100% format, it seems that the sales in January, which add up to something like 290, are equal to the sales in February, which add up to something like 390. So within each particular month, it shows the differentiation of where is the sales breakup coming from. But when you compare two different months, it gives a little bit distorted data. That's why stack charts, instead of just stack charts, it's a better idea to probably, instead of using 100% stack charts in this case, it is a better idea to probably use stacked column charts where the data set kind of comes for individual segments separately, right? We can also look at data in the form of some of the other areas where we could have 3D charts coming in the same format, where you could look at stacked column as 3D charts, and you could click on that, and it basically just shows a three-dimensional view of the same chart that we had seen, right? So broadly, that's how you would use your column charts. Column charts could basically be used in a variety of formats, specifically where you have three elements to look at. For example, in this case, sales, months, and region, right? If it was only sales and months, we could have used a line chart, but because it is sales, months, and regions, we get the data better represented using what is called as the column chart.